The train whistle screamed through the cold March morning of 1879, as Josephine Vance pressed her trembling hand against the swell of her belly, watching the green hills of Virginia disappear behind clouds of steam and smoke. She had been sent away in shame, banished by her own father after he discovered her condition. The man who had promised her marriage, the son of a wealthy merchant in Richmond, had disappeared the moment she told him about the baby, leaving nothing but broken promises and whispered rumors that followed her through church halls and market squares. Her father, a stern banker who valued reputation above all else, had given her two choices: marry a widower 3 times her age who needed a mother for his 5 children, or leave Virginia forever. Josephine had chosen exile. The ticket in her reticule bore the name of an aunt she barely remembered, her mother's older sister who lived in Del Rio, Texas. The letter of acceptance had been brief and cool, but it was the only lifeline offered to her. At 19 years old, with her entire world crumbling around her, Josephine had packed a single trunk and boarded the train west without looking back at the father who could not meet her eyes as she left. The journey had been long and exhausting. Days blurred into nights as the train carried her through changing landscapes, from the familiar green of Virginia to the sprawling plains and rugged terrain of Texas. Other passengers kept their distance once they noticed her condition and the absence of a wedding ring, their judgmental stares burning into her skin. She kept to herself, rationing the small amount of money she had saved, and tried not to think about the uncertain future that awaited her. As the train pulled into Del Rio on a dusty afternoon, Josephine gathered her belongings with shaking hands. The platform was smaller than she expected, just a wooden structure with a faded sign, and a few buildings visible in the distance. The air was different here, dry and hot, carrying the scent of sagebrush and something wild she could not name. She stepped down from the train car, her dark blue traveling dress dusty and wrinkled, her auburn hair falling loose from its pins after the long journey. She searched the sparse crowd for her aunt's face, trying to remember the woman from her childhood. But as the platform emptied and the other passengers dispersed into waiting wagons and embraces, no one approached her. Josephine stood alone with her trunk at her feet, feeling panic rise in her chest like flood water. "Excuse me, miss, are you waiting for someone?" The voice came from behind her, deep and gentle. Josephine turned to find a man standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, kind and concerned as they met hers. He wore simple cowboy clothes, well-worn but clean, and there was something steady about him that made her feel less afraid. "I was supposed to meet my aunt," Josephine said, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "Mrs. Helena Porter, do you know her?" The man's expression shifted, becoming somber. He took a step closer, his hat still clasped in his weathered hands. "Miss, I am afraid I have difficult news. Mrs. Porter passed away about 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia took her quick. I am sorry to be the one to tell you." The words hit Josephine like a physical blow. Her knees buckled and she reached out blindly for support. The man moved quickly, catching her elbow and steadying her with a firm but gentle grip. The platform seemed to tilt beneath her feet as the reality of her situation crashed down upon her. She had no family here, no place to go, no money for a return ticket even if her father would take her back, which she knew he would not. "Easy now," the man said softly. "Let me help you sit down." He guided her to a bench on the platform, and Josephine sank onto it gratefully. She pressed her hands to her face, fighting back tears. She could not cry here, not in front of this stranger, not when she needed to think clearly about what to do next. "My name is Raymond Rivers," the man said, kneeling down so he was at her eye level. "I worked for Mrs. Porter, tending her horses and helping with repairs around her property. I came to town today to pick up supplies. Is there anyone else I can take you to? Anyone expecting you?" Josephine shook her head, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Raymond was quiet for a moment, and she could feel him taking in her situation, the obvious signs of her condition, the single trunk, the absence of anyone to meet her. "Where were you traveling from?" he asked gently. "Virginia," she managed to say. "Richmond. That is a long way to come." His voice was thoughtful, not judgmental. "Do you have funds for lodging?" Josephine opened her reticule with trembling fingers and counted the coins inside. "Barely enough for a few nights at a boarding house, if Del Rio even had one." "A little," she said. "Not much." Raymond stood up, settling his hat back on his head. He looked down at her with an expression she could not quite read, something between concern and determination. "The boarding house here is not fit for a lady in your condition," he said bluntly. "And Mrs. Henderson, who runs it, is not the kindest woman to those in difficult circumstances." Josephine felt her cheeks burn with shame. Of course he had noticed. Everyone always noticed. "Mrs. Porter's house is empty now," Raymond continued. "Her lawyer is still sorting out her affairs, but the property needs tending. I have been staying in the foreman's cabin on the land, keeping things in order. The main house is locked up, but it has everything you would need. You could stay there while you figure out what comes next." Josephine looked up at him sharply. "I could not possibly impose on you like that. You do not even know me." "No, I do not," Raymond agreed. "But I know that Mrs. Porter would not have wanted her kin left stranded on a train platform with nowhere to go. She was a difficult woman in many ways, but she believed in family taking care of family. And right now, you need help." "I have no way to repay you," Josephine said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am not asking for payment," Raymond said. "I am offering shelter to someone who needs it. Nothing more, nothing less. You can decide what to do from there, but at least you will have a roof over your head and time to think." Josephine studied his face, searching for any sign of ulterior motive or hidden intentions. But his expression remained open and honest, those clear eyes holding nothing but genuine concern. She had no other options, no other offers of help. Pride would not keep her warm at night or put food in her belly. "Thank you," she said finally. "I accept your kindness, Mr. Rivers. Call me Raymond," he said, offering her a slight smile. "Let me get my wagon. We can load your trunk and head out to the property before dark." As he walked away to retrieve his wagon, Josephine sat on the bench and tried to process everything that had happened in the span of a few minutes. She had expected to arrive to a reluctant but stable situation with her aunt. Instead, she found herself completely adrift, dependent on the charity of a stranger. She placed her hand over her belly, feeling the small flutter of movement that had started just days ago. "We are going to be all right," she whispered to the child growing inside her. "Somehow, we are going to be all right." Raymond returned with a sturdy wagon pulled by two well-kept horses. He loaded her trunk into the back with ease, then helped her up onto the seat with careful hands, mindful of her condition. As they rolled out of Del Rio and onto the open road, Josephine got her first real look at Texas. The landscape was vast and strange to her Virginia eyes, all scrub brush and red earth beneath an impossibly wide sky. The sun beat down with an intensity she was not accustomed to, and the air smelled of dust and wild things. "How far is the property?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "About 5 miles west of town," Raymond said, keeping his eyes on the road. Mrs. Porter had a good spread. Not huge, but enough land for horses and a few head of cattle. She ran it mostly by herself after her husband died, which is why she hired me on about 2 years ago. What will happen to the property now? Josephine asked. Raymond shrugged. The lawyer said she has some distant relatives back east who might inherit. Could take months to sort out. In the meantime, someone needs to keep the place running, tend the animals, maintain the buildings. That is what I have been doing. They rode in silence for a while longer, the wagon creaking and swaying over the rutted road. Josephine felt exhaustion settling into her bones, the weight of travel and shock finally catching up with her. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, Raymond was gently touching her shoulder. "We are here," he said softly. Josephine opened her eyes and looked around. The house was larger than she expected, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and shuttered windows. The paint was fading and some repairs were needed, but it was solid and welcoming in its way. Behind it, she could see a barn and several outbuildings, along with corrals where horses grazed in the late afternoon sun. Raymond helped her down from the wagon and retrieved a key from his pocket. "I have been checking on the house regularly, keeping dust from settling too thick," he explained as he unlocked the front door. "The lawyer gave me permission to maintain things." The interior was dim and cool, furnished with simple but well-made furniture. Everything was neat and orderly, frozen in time from the moment Helena Porter had last walked through these rooms. Josephine could see touches of her aunt's personality in the embroidered cushions on the sofa, the carefully arranged books on the shelves, the daguerreotype photographs on the mantel. "The kitchen is stocked with basics," Raymond said, moving through the house and opening shutters to let in light. "I will bring in some fresh supplies from my cabin. The bedrooms are upstairs. You should take the main one, the one that was Mrs. Porter's. It has the best bed and catches the morning breeze." Josephine followed him through the house in a daze, trying to take it all in. It felt surreal to be standing in the home of an aunt she barely knew, an aunt who had died before Josephine could even arrive to meet her properly as an adult. Raymond carried her trunk upstairs and set it in the main bedroom. "I will leave you to get settled," he said. "My cabin is just beyond the barn if you need anything. I will bring by some supper in a bit." "Raymond," Josephine called as he turned to leave. He stopped in the doorway, looking back at her. "Why are you helping me?" Truly, he was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I grew up in an orphanage in Austin," he said finally. "Never knew my parents, never had family to speak of. People passed me by for years before Mrs. Porter took a chance on me and gave me honest work. I know what it is like to need help and have nowhere to turn. I know what it is like to be judged for circumstances beyond your control. I could not leave you stranded on that platform. It would not have been right." With that, he tipped his hat and left, his boots echoing on the wooden stairs. Josephine stood in the bedroom, surrounded by the belongings of a dead woman, carrying a child with no father in a place she never expected to be. She should have felt terrified. Instead, for the first time in months, she felt a small spark of something that might have been hope. That evening, Raymond returned with a basket of food: fresh bread, cold chicken, preserved vegetables, and a jar of milk. They ate together at the kitchen table, and he told her about the property, about the horses that needed tending, about the rhythms of life in Del Rio. Josephine found herself relaxing in his presence. He did not ask prying questions about her situation or make her feel ashamed. He simply talked to her like a person, like someone whose company he enjoyed. Over the following days, a routine developed. Raymond would come to the house each morning to check on her, bringing fresh eggs from the chickens and water from the well. He showed her around the property, introducing her to the horses and explaining how everything worked. Josephine found herself drawn to the animals, spending hours in the barn grooming them and talking softly to them. They did not judge her or whisper about her condition. They simply accepted her presence with soft knickers and gentle eyes. She began helping with small tasks around the house, needing to feel useful and not just a burden on Raymond's kindness. She mended curtains that had torn, swept floors, organized the kitchen. In the evenings, Raymond would often join her for supper, and they would talk about everything and nothing. He told her about working on various ranches across Texas, about learning to break horses, about the wild beauty of the land. She told him about Virginia, about her mother who had died when she was 12, about her love of reading and her talent for sketching. She did not tell him about the baby's father, and Raymond never asked. It was an unspoken agreement between them, a respect for boundaries that Josephine appreciated more than she could express. 2 weeks after her arrival, Josephine was in the barn brushing down a gentle mare named Stella when she heard raised voices from outside. She set down the brush and moved to the barn door, peering out cautiously. A well-dressed man was arguing with Raymond near the house, gesturing angrily. "This is highly irregular," the man was saying. "Mrs. Porter's estate is not yet settled. You cannot simply install some woman in the house without authorization." "She is Mrs. Porter's niece," Raymond said calmly. "She came all this way expecting to stay with her aunt. Where was she supposed to go when she arrived to find Mrs. Porter dead?" "That is not my concern," the man snapped. "I am the executor of this estate, and I say who can and cannot occupy the property. This woman needs to leave immediately." "Mr. Thornton," Raymond said, his voice taking on a harder edge, "she has nowhere else to go. She is family to Mrs. Porter. Surely the estate can allow her to stay until matters are settled." "She is a stranger who happens to share a bloodline," Mr. Thornton retorted. "And from what I can see, she is in a rather scandalous condition. I will not have the reputation of Mrs. Porter's estate tarnished by housing some fallen woman." Josephine felt anger flare in her chest, hot and righteous. She stepped out of the barn, her chin held high despite the color burning in her cheeks. "I am standing right here," she said coldly. "If you are going to insult me, at least have the courage to do it to my face." Both men turned to look at her. Mr. Thornton's expression was one of distaste, while Raymond showed concern and something that might have been admiration. "Miss Vance," Mr. Thornton said stiffly, "I apologize for your unfortunate situation, but I have responsibilities to this estate. I cannot allow you to remain here without proper authorization from the heirs." "Have the heirs been located?" Josephine asked. "Not yet, but it is only a matter of time." "Then, until they are found and make their wishes known, I see no harm in my remaining in my aunt's house," Josephine said firmly. "I am not damaging anything. In fact, I have been maintaining and improving the property. Surely that is better than leaving it empty and unattended." "The property is not unattended. Mr. Rivers is here." "Mr. Rivers stays in the foreman's cabin," Josephine pointed out. "He cannot be in two places at once. I have been helping to care for the house itself. If anything, my presence is beneficial to the estate." Mr. Thornton sputtered, clearly not accustomed to being challenged, especially by a woman. "This is most irregular." "So you have said," Josephine replied. "But irregular is not the same as illegal or improper. My aunt invited me here. The fact that she died before I arrived is tragic, but it does not change the fact that I have family claim to this place. I am not some random stranger off the street." Raymond stepped forward. "I will take full responsibility for Miss Vance's presence," he said. "If the heirs object when they are found, I will ensure she leaves without incident. But until then, I ask that you allow her to stay. It is the decent thing to do." Mr. Thornton looked between them, his face pinched with disapproval. Finally, he shook his head. Against my better judgment, I will allow this to continue for now. But I will be checking on the property regularly, and if I find anything amiss, Miss Vance will be removed immediately. Do I make myself clear? Perfectly clear, Josephine said, her voice steady even as her heart pounded. With a final disapproving look, Mr. Thornton climbed into his buggy and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. As soon as he was out of sight, Josephine felt her knees go weak. Raymond was at her side immediately, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "That was remarkably brave," he said, a hint of a smile on his lips. "I thought he was going to have an apoplexy." "I am tired of people like him deciding my fate," Josephine said, her voice shaking slightly. "I am tired of being treated like I have no say in my own life." "You handled him well," Raymond said. "Better than I could have." They walked back to the house together, and Josephine sank onto the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. Raymond sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance but offering his solid presence as comfort. "What if he does make me leave?" Josephine asked quietly. "What will I do then?" Raymond was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful and deliberate. "I have been thinking about that, about your situation and what options you might have." Josephine turned to look at him, waiting. "This may seem forward, and I do not want you to feel pressured in any way," Raymond continued, "but I have a proposal. Not a romantic one, just a practical solution to a difficult problem." "Go on," Josephine said, her heart beating faster. "We could marry," Raymond said simply. "It would be a marriage of convenience, of course. You would have my name and my protection. Your child would have a legal father. You could stay here at the house without Mr. Thornton or anyone else being able to object. I would continue staying in the cabin, and we would carry on as we have been, just with the benefit of a marriage certificate." Josephine stared at him, stunned. "You would do that? Why?" "Because it is a solution that helps us both," Raymond said. "I have been thinking about settling down properly, maybe trying to save enough to buy a small place of my own someday. Being married might open up opportunities that are not available to a single ranch hand. And you need stability and respectability, especially with a child on the way. We get along well, we could help each other." "That is very practical reasoning," Josephine said slowly, "but marriage is not something to enter into lightly, even a practical one." "I know," Raymond said. "I've given it a lot of thought over the past few days. I would not suggest it if I did not think it could work. But I want you to know that there would be no expectations. You would have your space, your freedom. It would be a partnership, nothing more." Josephine looked out at the land stretching before them, the horses grazing peacefully in the corral, the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. She thought about her father back in Virginia, about the merchant's son who had abandoned her, about all the ways her life had spiraled beyond her control. And then she thought about Raymond, this kind stranger who had shown her nothing but respect and decency. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course," Raymond said. "Take all the time you need." But as the days passed, Josephine found herself considering the proposal more seriously. She watched Raymond work with the horses, saw the gentle patience he showed with the animals, the quiet competence with which he handled every task. She noticed the way he always made sure she had everything she needed, how he never made her feel like a burden, how his presence had become a source of comfort in her uncertain world. A week after his proposal, Josephine found Raymond in the barn, repairing a broken stall door. She stood in the doorway for a moment, gathering her courage. "Raymond," she said, and he looked up from his work. "I have thought about your proposal, about the marriage." He set down his tools and gave her his full attention, his expression carefully neutral. "And I accept," Josephine said. "If the offer is still open, Something shifted in Raymond's face, a flash of emotion too quick to identify. "The offer is still open," he said. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel forced into this." "I am certain," Josephine said firmly. "You are right. It is a practical solution that benefits us both. And more than that, I trust you. That is not something I can say about many people anymore." Raymond nodded slowly. "Then we will make the arrangements. I will speak to the minister in town tomorrow." They were married 3 days later in the small church in Del Rio. Josephine wore a simple dress of pale green that she had sewn herself from fabric Raymond had bought in town. There were no guests, only the minister and his wife as witnesses. The ceremony was brief and businesslike, but when Raymond slipped a plain gold band onto Josephine's finger, his hands were gentle and his eyes were kind. "I promise to take care of you and your child," he said quietly, though it was not part of the traditional vows. "I promise to be a good husband in whatever way that means for us." "I promise to be a good wife," Josephine replied, her voice steady, "and to honor this partnership we are building." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Raymond did not kiss her. Instead, he simply squeezed her hand gently, a gesture of solidarity and support. They signed the marriage certificate, and just like that, Josephine Vance became Josephine Rivers, with all the protection and respectability that name provided. The change in her circumstances was immediate and profound. When they returned to the property, Raymond helped her move some of his things into the main house, though he insisted on taking the smaller bedroom down the hall from hers. "We are married in name," he said, "but you still deserve your privacy and space." Mr. Thornton was considerably less hostile when he came by the following week and learned of the marriage. A married woman living in her deceased aunt's house with her husband was far more respectable than a single woman in her condition. He was still stiff and formal, but he could no longer threaten to remove her from the property. As spring turned to summer, Josephine and Raymond settled into married life. They worked together on the property, developing an easy rhythm and partnership. Josephine discovered she had a talent for keeping accounts and managing the household, while Raymond handled the physical labor and animal care. They took meals together, talking about their days and making plans for improvements to the property. Slowly, carefully, friendship deepened between them. Josephine found herself looking forward to Raymond's company, to his quiet humor and steady presence. She noticed small things about him: the way he always woke before dawn, the gentleness of his hands with frightened animals, the far-off look he got when watching the sunset, as though he was thinking about something he could not quite put into words. Raymond, for his part, seemed to take genuine pleasure in Josephine's company. He brought her wildflowers from the fields, taught her to ride the gentlest horse in the stable, sat with her in the evenings while she sketched, and he repaired tack. He never pressed her for more than she was willing to give, never made demands or treated her as anything less than his equal partner. The baby grew inside her, and with it, Josephine's anxiety about the future. One evening in late June, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight, she finally voiced her fears. "What kind of father will you be?" she asked abruptly. "To the baby, I mean. What should we tell him or her about us?" Raymond was quiet for a long moment, considering the question carefully. "I will be whatever kind of father you want me to be," he said finally. "I could be distant, just a name on paper, or I could be involved if that is what you wish. As for what we tell the child, I think we should tell as much of the truth as we can. That we married to help each other, that I chose to be their father even though I did not have to be. Children can understand love that is chosen just as well as love that is given by blood. Sometimes better." "You have thought about this," Josephine said softly. "I have thought about little else," Raymond admitted. I know this started as a practical arrangement, but I find myself caring about the outcome more than I expected to. I want to do right by you and the child. I want to be a good father if you will let me." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes. "I think you will be a wonderful father," she said. "You are the kindest man I have ever known." Raymond reached over and took her hand, the first truly intimate gesture he had made since their wedding. His palm was rough and warm against hers. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "Braver, too. That child is lucky to have you." They sat together in the gathering darkness, hands clasped, and something fundamental shifted between them. The marriage of convenience was becoming something more, something neither of them had quite expected but both were beginning to want. As summer deepened and Josephine's belly swelled, Raymond became increasingly attentive. He insisted she rest during the hottest part of the day, brought her cool water from the well, made sure she was not overworking herself. He built a cradle in the barn workshop, sanding the wood until it was smooth as silk, carving simple designs into the headboard. When he presented it to her, Josephine cried at the thoughtfulness of it, at the tangible evidence of his commitment to their growing family. One sweltering July afternoon, Josephine was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she felt a sharp pain in her lower back. She straightened up, pressing her hand to the ache, and felt a sudden gush of fluid down her legs. For a moment she stood frozen in shock, and then the next contraction hit, stronger and more insistent. "Raymond," she called out, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "Raymond, I need you." He came running from the barn, taking one look at her and understanding immediately. "The baby is coming," he said, his voice remarkably calm even as his face paled. "All right. Let us get you inside. Do you think you can walk?" Josephine nodded, and Raymond supported her as they made their way slowly back to the house. He helped her upstairs to her bedroom, then ran to saddle his fastest horse. "I am going to get Dr. Chen from town," he said. "Will you be all right for a short while?" "Go quickly," Josephine gasped as another contraction gripped her. Raymond rode like the devil himself was chasing him, reaching Del Rio in record time. He pounded on the door of Dr. Chen's office, a skilled physician who had come to Texas from San Francisco and had earned the respect of most of the town despite the prejudice he sometimes faced. Dr. Chen took one look at Raymond's panicked face and grabbed his medical bag without questions. They raced back to the property together, and by the time they arrived, Josephine was deep in labor. The afternoon stretched into evening and Raymond paced downstairs, listening to the sounds from above and feeling utterly helpless. He had assisted with dozens of horse and cattle births, but this was different. This was Josephine, and he realized with startling clarity that he could not bear the thought of anything happening to her. When had she become so important to him? When had this practical arrangement transformed into something that gripped his heart and would not let go? As full darkness fell, a new sound joined the labor pains echoing through the house. The sharp, insistent cry of a newborn baby. Raymond froze at the bottom of the stairs, his heart hammering in his chest. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Chen appeared at the top of the stairs, wiping his hands on a clean cloth. "You have a son," he said with a tired smile. "A healthy, loud son, and Mrs. Rivers did beautifully. She is tired but well. You can go up now." Raymond took the stairs two at a time, his boots thundering on the wood. He pushed open the bedroom door and stopped short at the sight before him. Josephine lay propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale with exhaustion. But she was smiling, radiant, as she cradled a tiny bundle wrapped in a clean blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Raymond approached slowly, almost reverently. He looked down at the small red face peering out from the blanket, at the tiny fingers curled into fists, at the shock of dark hair. Something fierce and protective and overwhelmingly powerful surged through his chest. "He is perfect," Raymond whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" Josephine asked. Raymond's hands shook as he carefully took the baby from her, supporting the small head the way he had seen mothers do. The baby was surprisingly solid despite his small size, warm and real and impossibly precious. Dark eyes blinked up at him, unfocused but seemingly curious. "Hello, little one," Raymond murmured. "Welcome to the world. I am your father, and I promise I am going to do everything I can to keep you and your mother safe and happy." Josephine watched them together, husband and son, and felt her heart swell with an emotion she had not expected to feel again. Love. Real, genuine, overwhelming love. Not just for her baby, but for the man holding him with such tender care, the man who had chosen them both when he had no obligation to do so. "What should we name him?" Raymond asked, not taking his eyes off the baby. "I was thinking Samuel," Josephine said. "Samuel Rivers, if that suits you." "Samuel," Raymond repeated, testing the name. "Sam, I like it. It is a good, strong name." Dr. Chen stayed long enough to ensure both mother and baby were stable, giving Raymond instructions for their care. After the doctor left, Raymond brought Josephine water and food, then settled into the rocking chair beside her bed with Samuel still in his arms. He did not want to put the baby down, did not want to stop looking at this small miracle they had been given. "You should rest," Josephine said, though she made no move to take the baby back. "I will," Raymond said. "In a while, right now, I just want to sit here with my family, my family." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Josephine reached out and Raymond took her hand. The three of them connected in a moment of perfect peace. The days after Samuel's birth were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Raymond moved his things into Josephine's bedroom so he could help with the baby during the night, taking turns walking the floor with Samuel when he fussed, changing diapers with fumbling but determined hands, making silly faces to coax out smiles, even though they both knew it was too early for the baby to smile back. They grew closer through the shared intimacy of caring for a newborn, the barriers between them continuing to erode. Late one night, as they both sat up with a particularly fussy Samuel, Josephine finally told Raymond about the baby's biological father. About the promises made and broken, about the shame and the banishment, about the pain of being rejected by everyone she had known. Raymond listened without judgment, holding Samuel against his shoulder and patting the baby's back gently. "That man was a fool," he said when she finished. "He gave up the two best things he could ever have had. But his loss is my gain, and I cannot find it in myself to be sorry about that." "Do you ever regret it?" Josephine asked quietly. "Marrying me, taking on all of this," Raymond looked at her in genuine surprise. "Regret it?" "Josephine, marrying you was the smartest thing I have ever done. You and Samuel are the best parts of my life. I would not change a single thing." "We have only known each other a few months," Josephine pointed out. "This is not what you signed up for when you made that practical proposal." "You are right," Raymond agreed. "This is so much better than what I signed up for." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "The truth is, I fell in love with you. I am not sure exactly when it happened. Maybe it was when you stood up to Mr. Thornton. Or maybe it was one of those evenings on the porch. Or maybe it was the very first day when you looked at me with those big green eyes, and I knew I could not leave you stranded. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being practical and became very, very real for me." Josephine felt her breath catch in her throat. "Raymond." "You do not have to say anything back," Raymond said quickly. "I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give. I just wanted you to know. I love you, Josephine. I love our son. I love the life we are building together. And whether you ever feel the same way or not, that is not going to change how I feel or how committed I am to our family." Tears slipped down Josephine's cheeks, but they were good tears, healing tears. "You really are the kindest man I have ever known," she whispered. "And I love you too. I think I have been falling in love with you for a while now, but I was afraid to admit it, even to myself. I was afraid to believe that something real and good could come from such difficult circumstances." Raymond's face broke into a smile that transformed his whole appearance, making him look younger and happier than she had ever seen him. "You love me?" he asked, as though he needed to hear it again to believe it. "I love you," Josephine confirmed, laughing through her tears. "I love you so much, Raymond Rivers." He crossed the room carefully, mindful of the baby in his arms, and kissed her. It was their first real kiss, tender and sweet and full of promise. Samuel chose that moment to let out a loud burp, breaking the tension and making them both laugh. "Even our son approves," Raymond said, grinning. From that night forward, they were truly husband and wife in every sense. Their love grew deeper with each passing day, strengthened by the shared work of raising Samuel and maintaining the property. When Samuel was 3 months old, the lawyer finally located Helena Porter's heirs, distant cousins in Philadelphia who had no interest in moving to Texas. They agreed to sell the property, and Raymond used every penny he had saved, along with a loan from the bank, to purchase it outright. The day the property deed was registered in his name, Raymond came home with a bottle of apple cider to celebrate. They toasted to their future, to their growing family, to the home they had built together from nothing but kindness and circumstance. As autumn painted the Texas landscape in shades of gold and red, Josephine realized she was pregnant again. When she told Raymond, he picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests, then immediately apologized and asked if spinning was bad for the baby. His joy and excitement were boundless, and he spent the pregnancy doting on her even more than he had before, if that was possible. Their daughter was born the following spring, a tiny girl with Raymond's blue-gray eyes and Josephine's auburn hair. They named her Rose, and Samuel, now a sturdy toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, patting her hand gently and singing nonsense songs that made Josephine and Raymond laugh. The years flowed by like water, each one bringing new joys and challenges. They expanded the horse breeding operation, gaining a reputation throughout Texas for quality animals and fair dealing. Samuel grew into a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning to ride and rope and care for the horses. Rose was more reserved but showed an early talent for drawing, just like her mother. When Samuel was 5 and Rose was 3, Josephine gave birth to twins. 2 boys they named Henry and James. The house that had once felt empty and echoing was now filled with the chaos and laughter of children. Raymond built additions to accommodate their growing family, and Josephine hired a young woman from town to help with the household work. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Raymond pulled Josephine close against his side. "Do you remember when we first met?" he asked. "When I found you alone on that train platform? I remember thinking you were either very kind or very foolish," Josephine said with a smile, offering help to a stranger in such obvious trouble. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Raymond said. "Even scared and exhausted and months from home, there was something about you that just caught me. I told myself I was just being practical with that marriage proposal, but I think part of me already knew I wanted you in my life permanently." "I am glad you found me," Josephine said softly. "I am glad you offered me that chance." I cannot imagine what my life would be like if you had not been there that day." "You would have survived," Raymond said. "You are strong enough to have made it through anything, but I am glad I was there too. I am glad I got to be part of your story." They sat together as the sun set, their 4 children playing in the yard, their home solid and welcoming behind them. It was not the life either of them had planned or expected, but it was a good life, built on a foundation of kindness that had transformed into the deepest love. More years passed, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their growing children. Samuel grew into a fine young man, as good with horses as his father and with a quick mind for business besides. Rose developed her artistic talents and began teaching drawing to children in Del Rio. Henry and James, as different as twins could be, both found their own paths, Henry toward veterinary medicine and James toward the law. Josephine and Raymond grew older together, their love deepening with each shared sunrise and sunset. They had weathered droughts and hard winters, sick children and difficult seasons, but they had weathered them together, their partnership as strong as ever. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Raymond took Josephine back to Del Rio, to the train platform where they had first met. It looked much the same, though the town around it had grown considerably over the years. "I have been thinking about that day," Raymond said, standing on the platform with Josephine's hand clasped in his. "About how I asked you to stay temporarily, just until you figured things out. I have a different request now." "Oh," Josephine asked, smiling at her husband, this man who had been her salvation and her great love. "Stay forever," Raymond said simply. "I know you have already stayed this long, and I know we are married and have 4 children and a life built together. But I want to ask it properly now, not as a practical arrangement or a temporary solution, but as a man who loves his wife more than anything in the world. Stay with me forever, Josephine. Keep building this life with me. Grow old with me. Be my partner in everything until our last breath." Josephine felt tears slip down her cheeks, as moved now as she had been all those years ago when a stranger offered her unexpected kindness. "I will stay forever," she promised. "I will love you forever. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Raymond Rivers. You and our children and this wild, beautiful life we have built." He kissed her there on the platform, in front of anyone who cared to watch, with all the passion and tenderness of 20 years of marriage and a lifetime of love still ahead. They returned home to find their children had arranged a surprise celebration. The house filled with friends and neighbors and decorated with ribbons and flowers from Rose's careful hands. There was music and dancing and laughter, and as Josephine danced with Raymond under the stars, she thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off that train so many years ago, alone and ashamed and certain her life was over. That woman could never have imagined this, she thought. Could never have dreamed that shame and exile would lead to the greatest happiness she had ever known. But life had a way of surprising people, of taking the hardest moments and transforming them into something beautiful. All it took was one person willing to offer kindness without conditions, and another person brave enough to accept it. As they grew older, Raymond and Josephine became beloved figures in Del Rio. Their ranch was known as a place where people could find honest work and fair treatment, where young men who reminded Raymond of himself could learn a trade and earn respect. Josephine became involved in charitable work, helping other women who found themselves in difficult circumstances, offering them the same hand of support that had been offered to her. Samuel took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch, proving himself a worthy successor to his father's legacy. He married a school teacher from town, and they gave Josephine and Raymond their first grandchildren, a boy and a girl who reminded them so much of their own children at that age. Rose never married, finding fulfillment in her art and her teaching. She traveled to San Antonio and even to New Orleans, her paintings gaining recognition and providing her with independence and purpose. She remained close to her family, returning often to the ranch that was always home. Henry completed his veterinary training in Austin and returned to Del Rio to practice, often working alongside his father with the horses. James became a lawyer, though unlike many of his profession, he was known for taking cases for those who could not afford to pay, fighting for justice rather than just money. On the evening of Raymond's 60th birthday, the whole family gathered at the ranch. Children and grandchildren filled every room, their voices and laughter echoing through the house. After dinner, as the party continued around them, Raymond and Josephine slipped away to the porch, their favorite retreat after all these years. "Look at all of this," Josephine said, gesturing to the house full of family. "Look at what we built from one moment of kindness on a train platform." "We built it together," Raymond said, putting his arm around her. "Every bit of it. Do you remember what I said on our wedding day?" Josephine asked. "About being a good wife and honoring our partnership." "I remember everything about that day," Raymond said. "I want you to know that I have tried my best to keep that promise," Josephine said, "to be a good partner to you, to honor what we built. But it became so much more than I ever expected. You became so much more than I ever expected. You are everything I never knew I needed," Raymond said softly. "Every single day with you has been a gift. Every moment of this life we built together has been worth more than all the money or land or success in the world. You are my home, Josephine. You always have been." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. Inside the house, their children and grandchildren celebrated, the next generation already making their own memories in the home Josephine and Raymond had built together. Years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes that time always brings. Raymond's hair went completely white, and he moved a bit slower, but his eyes remained as kind and clear as they had been that first day on the train platform. Josephine's auburn hair faded to silver, and her hands developed arthritis that made sketching difficult, but her spirit remained undiminished. They faced losses, as all long lives must include. Friends passed away, and they said goodbye to beloved horses and dogs that had been part of the family. But they faced these sorrows together, their love a constant source of strength and comfort. On a warm September evening in 1921, 42 years after they first met, Raymond and Josephine sat together on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Raymond had been ill for several months, though he bore it with typical stoicism. Josephine sat beside him, holding his hand, their fingers interlaced as they had been for more than 4 decades. "I have had a good life," Raymond said quietly. "Better than I ever imagined possible for an orphan kid with no prospects and no family. You gave me that, Josephine. You and our children. You gave me everything." "We gave it to each other," Josephine said, squeezing his hand gently. "I was lost when I came here, broken and alone. You put me back together and showed me what real love looks like, what a real family looks like." "No regrets?" Raymond asked, his voice soft. "Not a single one," Josephine said firmly. "Every moment with you, even the hard ones, has been exactly what I needed." "You are the great love of my life, Raymond Rivers. Meeting you was the moment my real life began." Raymond smiled, that same gentle smile that had first made her feel safe all those years ago. "Stay with me a little longer," he whispered. "I will stay as long as you need me," Josephine promised. "Forever, remember. That is what we promised each other." They sat together as the sun set over the land they had worked and loved and built a life upon. Samuel and his family were inside along with Rose, who had come as soon as she heard her father was failing. Henry had been called from town, and James was expected on the evening train. The family was gathering, as families do in these final moments. But for now, it was just the two of them, husband and wife, partners in all things, their love as strong at the end as it had been at the beginning. Raymond passed peacefully that night, surrounded by his family, Josephine's hand in his until his very last breath. She grieved him deeply, as one grieves the loss of their other half, but she did not regret a single moment they had shared. He had given her everything: love, family, home, purpose. He had chosen her when she had nothing to offer, had loved her when she thought she was unlovable, had built a life with her that exceeded her wildest dreams. Josephine lived another 8 years after Raymond's death, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. She spent her final years recording their story, wanting future generations to know how it all began. How one act of kindness had transformed 2 lives and created a legacy that would continue for generations. She told them about the frightened young woman on the train platform and the cowboy who offered her hope. About a marriage born of necessity that became the greatest love story she had ever known. About building a home and a family from nothing but determination and devotion. When Josephine passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1929, she was laid to rest beside Raymond under the vast Texas sky they had both loved. Their children and grandchildren gathered to say goodbye, but they also gathered to celebrate. To honor a love that had started with "Stay Forever" and had lasted exactly that long. The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's care, and eventually under his children's care after him. The story of Raymond and Josephine became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The values they had built their life upon, kindness, hard work, loyalty, and love, became the foundation upon which their descendants built their own lives. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, their descendants would sit on that same porch and look out at the land Raymond and Josephine had loved. They would think about the scared young woman and the compassionate cowboy, about a chance meeting on a train platform that had changed everything. They would think about how the most broken circumstances can lead to the most beautiful outcomes, if only someone is willing to offer help without conditions, and someone else is brave enough to accept it. The house still stood strong, expanded and modernized over the years, but with its heart unchanged. The horses still grazed in the corrals. The land still stretched out under that impossibly wide Texas sky. And the love that Raymond and Josephine had built together continued to echo through the generations, a testament to the power of choosing love even when, especially when, circumstances seem impossible. Their story became more than just family history. It became a reminder that kindness matters, that love can grow in the most unexpected places, that choosing to help someone in need can change not just their life, but your own in ways you cannot possibly imagine. And on certain evenings when the light hits just right and the breeze carries the scent of sagebrush and wildflowers, those who know the story swear they can almost see them. A tall cowboy with kind eyes and an auburn-haired woman with a gentle smile, sitting together on the porch, hands clasped, watching the sunset over the land they loved. Together forever, just as they promised, just as they deserved. The end of their earthly story was simply the beginning of their legend, a love story that started with one simple question at a train platform and grew into something that would never truly end. Because real love, the kind that chooses and keeps choosing every single day, does not die. It lives on in children and grandchildren, in the stories told around dinner tables, in the values passed down through generations. Raymond and Josephine's love lived on in every act of kindness their descendants showed to strangers. It lived on in every difficult circumstance met with courage rather than despair. It lived on in the knowledge that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best, if only we are brave enough to walk through them. And so their story, which began in shame and exile, ended in glory and legacy. A reminder that we are not defined by how our stories begin, but by how we choose to continue them. Raymond chose kindness when he could have chosen indifference. Josephine chose courage when she could have chosen despair. Together, they chose love when they could have chosen merely convenience. Those choices, made moment by moment and day by day over the course of more than 4 decades together, created something that would last far longer than any single lifetime. They created a family, a home, a legacy, and a love story for the ages. Their great-great-grandchildren would eventually read Josephine's carefully written account of their story, preserved and cherished by the family. They would marvel at the courage and kindness it took to build something beautiful from such difficult beginnings. They would learn that love is not just a feeling but a choice, one that must be made over and over again. And perhaps, in their own lives, when faced with someone in need or difficult circumstances, they would remember the story of the cowboy and the woman from the train. They would remember that one moment of kindness can change everything. That love can grow in the most unexpected places. That stay forever is not just a promise but a choice, one worth making every single day. The sun set over Del Rio, Texas, as it had for generations, painting the sky in shades of gold and red and purple. The land remained constant and beautiful, bearing witness to all the stories that had unfolded across its surface. And somewhere in that vast Texas sky, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds continued there forever, together at last in the place beyond farewells. Their story was complete, full circle from that first frightened meeting to a lifetime of love and partnership. From stay forever to forever achieved. From broken beginnings to a legacy that would never end. It was everything a love story should be. True, hard-won, and absolutely worth every moment of the journey.